The Greeks were great talkers, and they have talked much about poetry, yet their words were carried away by the winds of Mediterranean before Plato, except for a line or two in the poets and a few fragments from philosophical texts. There was no real literary criticism in the sense of a theory of literature. According to a critic, even the brilliant literary evolutions that Aristophanes make in his comedies are practical rather than rhetorical. So, if we want to begin with general ideas on literature, we must begin with Plato. As Tolstoy is going to find later, Plato found that he had to betray his own art because he had discovered something he believed to be greater. Saint Augustine will read him and use him to strengthen the antagonism of the early Christian church to literature. The political totalitarians of the 20th century, both communist and fascist, are going to borrow his approach. Everyone who believes he has found the truth will fall into Plato's position toward art. If one's sole concern is building the Platonic Republic, the Soviet state, or the city of God, literature must be done away with or put in chains. What is a poem compared with man's immortal soul or the classless society? The poets living and dead were Plato's enemies. Everyone accepted the fact that they were teachers. The poets, as all agreed, were inspired. This Plato felt was enough to damn them, for is not truth arrived at by reason. In the Aeon, he gave the popular theory of poetry. For the poet is a light and winged and holy thing, and there is no invention in him until he has been inspired and is out of his senses. And then the mind is no longer in him when he has not attained to this state. He is powerless and is unable to utter his oracles. Many are the noble words in which poets speak of actions like your own words about Homer, but they do not speak of them by any rules of their inventions, any rules of art. Only when they make that to which the muse impels them are their inventions inspired. And then one of them will make another hymns of praise, another choral strains, another epic or iambic verses. And he who is good at one is not good at any other kind of verse. For not by art does the poet sing, but by power divine. This apparently noble conception of poetry he then turned against the poets. The charioteer knows more about chariot racing than Homer. Every artisan knows more about his own craft than the poet who speaks of his craft. Thus, as a teacher, the poet is inferior to the artisan. Since then, the poet speaks not from knowledge but from inspiration or madness. For Plato, it is much the same thing. He cannot be trusted as a teacher. The poet fared no better when examination in the light of Plato's metaphysics. According to Plato, reality existed in the world of ideas, not in the world of material things. There was, for instance, the idea of the bed, the real and unchanging bed, the individual bed that the cabinet maker constructed was an imitation, by definition imperfect, of the ideal bed. When the poet described a bed, he was imitating an imitation and was thus 2 degrees removed from the truth or reality. The poet's art was an inferior who marries an inferior and has inferior offspring. For morality and ethics, the citizen had better go almost anywhere rather than to the poets. In Homer, God is represented as doing things which are morally wrong. Ethics and politics cannot for Plato be disentangled. In attempting to set up an education for the future rulers or guardians of his ideal republic, he finds that the poets do not teach good citizenship. Not only do they lie about the gods, but they represent men as doing unworthy things. They show heroes sulking in their tents, magistrates taking bribes, and many other things which soldiers and rulers should not consider even possible. Particularly evil is their representation of Hades as a shadowy, unpleasant place. Young men should be taught to die bravely for their country, with the promise of reward in the afterlife. Thus, the poet is what examples would be the poets give them? Women, bad women, even low characters such as smiths or other artificers or oarsmen or boatsmen or the like. Indeed, all things that seem pleasant to the ignorant multitude. Nor must we forget that poetry feeds and waters the passions that ought to be dried up. She lets them rule, although they ought to be controlled if mankind are ever to increase in happiness and virtue.